We'll start soon as I see some numbers come in.
Okay, no problem. Grab a drink real quick.
Hey, welcome in. Welcome in. Hey, my girl, Miss Kendra. Thank you for coming in. And Desiree, Miss Kendra, she told her story the last podcast we had.
Hi,
It
Miss
was
Kendra.
amazing. Yes, amazing. All right, we got a couple people coming in. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So, welcome everyone to the Queen's Quarters, where your voice is your power. Today's special guest will be talking about her powerful transformation from breaking free of expectations and healing from toxic relationships to becoming an entrepreneur. She's here to share her story. Let's welcome Desiree Cooper. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So, what we're going to do is I'm going to give you the floor. This is your story. I want you to be able to tell your story. And if there's any time you want to stop, and can you see the chat?
Let's see. I do. Let's see. Comments. There it is.
All right. So, if you looking at the chat or anything and see a question that you would like to answer, then feel free to stop and I'll highlight it and you can answer it if you like. But other than that, we will let you tell your story. I may ad lib here and there, and we'll hold questions or anything at the end because I want to make sure you can say whatever you need to say.
Okay. No
All
problem.
right. So the
Uh,
floor is yours.
Thank you.
You're
Hi,
welcome.
all. I am Desiree Cooper. I came to this floor because I was called to, you know, come out publicly and just tell my story because a lot of times people see where people end up, but they don't see the transition. And the transition is messy. And a lot of times people just don't want to deal with the mess. They don't want to look at it. They don't want to deal with it. They don't even want to be there for people who are going through the mess. And so hopefully my story can give people the courage to feel like they're not alone.
Right.
So I grew up as a first generation American. My parents immigrated from Indonesia to Europe, and then through Ellis Island, they came to America. And so I was born here. And the way they raised me was definitely with, kindness and compassion in my heart, but also a very strict regimen of etiquette. Um, I was in etiquette classes at 5 years old. My first language was Dutch. My second language was English. And there's some French, Italian, and German never stuck. But one thing they made sure of was that I knew how to use please and thank you in
Mhm.
multiple languages. That was a requirement. Um, they taught me early, education was key. Um, they were basically raising me to be a very educated but feminine woman. Um, the goal in life was to be the wife of a very high value man. Um,
Mhm.
I knew how to throw dinner parties. There was there was a certain way I was supposed to hold myself with class and grace, and that was definitely ingrained as I grew up. Um, Unfortunately, my mother was diagnosed with cancer when I was 3 years old. So that kind of derailed a lot of my education
Mhm.
um, as a woman, put it that way. Um,
Mhm.
so I didn't really have that many female um, mentors to grow up with. Um, I ended up going from having that training to becoming a caregiver right away. Um, I, I let's see, right around kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, my mom was going in and out of the hospital, so I would actually stay home to help take care of her. I had an older brother and sister, but they were already married and out of the house. So that wasn't expected of them because they had their own families. But since I
Mhm.
was the oldest child in the house, it was my responsibility to help take care of my mother. And expectations on a child that young, um, you learn people pleasing real fast.
Mhm.
And that's one thing that I was constantly living up to, that expectation of people pleasing. I had to do this. I had to do that. I had to make, you know, I had to present myself a certain way.
Right.
And as she got sicker, that role was more expected of me. My father was working, so I had to become that female head of the household. And so my childhood was not much of I guess, a childhood. It was more um, expectations, obligations. You have to do this, you have to do that. And that innocence part, I started to disassociate from just my life in general. Um, and when I would disassociate, it would be for hours on end. Because in my room, I had mirrored closet doors,
Mhm.
and it was a sliding glass door and two doors that would open. So I would put myself in this triangle, and it's a mirror room where there's
Mhm.
everything there. And, a lot of people have hard times with those kind of mirrored rooms, but for
Mhm.
me, it was safe. Like, my reflection over there, that's the person that's feeling those feelings. The person over there, that's the person that had all the responsibilities and the obligations. It
Got it.
wasn't me.
Mhm. Got it.
So, when I would hear my dad come in and he would knock on the door, that's when I knew I had to leave my safe space. So, I would leave that, and then of course put on a stoic face and go deal with what I had to deal with.
Got you.
um, to keep me busy in school, I was in advanced placement classes. I'm not too sure how what it's called everywhere else, but in California, it's called the GATE program for Gifted and Talented Education.
Okay.
I was already in elementary school taking, um, you know, higher higher grade classes, and it wasn't just according to the curriculum of your elementary school. You were also taught leadership. You were also taught organization, things you wouldn't learn in school.
Mhm.
So I was learning all of those skills really early. And I ended up having to use them in my life as well, because while my father was at work and my mother was in the hospital, I had a house to run. I had a younger brother to look after. And this is all before I'm 10 years old. So, kind of gauge the mindset of a 10-year-old having to run a house. And
Right. And we hear about that. We do hear about that in like different cultures. They start very young.
yeah.
Here we start very late. Very late. It was like, 10 and 11-year-olds, they know how to run a whole house in another country, right?
Yeah. And that's kind of like the Asian European culture, where the eldest child in the house is always expected to take care of it if there's anything going on with the parents.
Mhm.
So, yeah, my mom was in and out of the hospital, and the time that I did spend with her, she would try to give me my childhood. She was like, "No, baby, don't do that. I'll take care of it." But if any of my other family was around, my aunts, my grandmother, it was just like they would look down on me. And I don't know if they kind of forgot that I spoke Dutch, but they would speak about me in another room like I didn't hear what they were saying.
Wow.
And my grandmother had a lot to say negative to say about me. So it was just like, if as as a child 8 to 10 years old hearing these things from, from your family, people who are supposed to protect you and love you, that type of thing.
Mhm.
You're just like, what,
Right.
I I'm not living up to these expectations. I'm not
Mhm.
good enough.
Wow.
So learning that as a child, it carries with you.
It does. Mhm.
Yeah. So as she got sicker, um of course we ended up having an in-house hospice nurse towards the end of her life. And I was about 10 when this happened. And the nurse that would come in, she was a blessing. She's like, "Why aren't you playing outside?" I was like, "No, I have to take care of my mom." And she's like, "You're too little to do this. Go play outside."
Mhm.
And so whenever she was in the house, it was like I got a little bit of my childhood back. I was able to go out and play with my friends and, experience a little bit of what I should have been experiencing the whole time.
Right.
Um, and then again, as she was getting sicker, I had more activities that I had to do. I had more schoolwork. Um, uh, I even had kind of a job because my my dad already kind of expected me to kind of earn money, and so did my parents. But um, because I was already interested in modeling and education and things like that, I did modeling for the J.C. Penney and the Sears catalog.
Mhm.
So I was building a trust fund at the same time. So there was a lot going on as a kid.
Yeah. See, I have one question real quick.
Go ahead.
Was it when you said your aunt would come over and you would get that little portion of being a child? Was it easy? Was it
No,
easy mentally? Okay,
no.
I didn't think it was because I was like, how can you, have this mindset of I got to take care of the home, and then your aunt says, "Okay, no, you don't have to do that. I'll do this. Go out and play."
Yeah,
How can you turn that off?
you don't, because I end up mothering my friends.
Got it.
Like they would start doing stuff irresponsibly. I'm like, no,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that we'll get in trouble for that. But again, like being in having all those obligations and things to live up to, it was just like it was constraining. It was very constricting because I always had something to do. My grades had to be a certain way, my presentation had to be a certain way, my speech had to be a certain way.
Mhm.
Um, and then learning that, yes, in a way, I'm supposed to be this way because my future husband is expecting this kind of behavior.
Right.
Um, so that's what I was living up to. Um, my mother did pass away when I was 11. And at that point, my dad was away working. I had full reign of the house, and it was just like the gloves are off.
Mhm.
Rebellion 100%, 60 miles an hour.
I bet. Yeah.
And that's where I got into trouble. So, my dad's still coming home. I still, made sure that his dinner was ready, things like that. But then I started getting into trouble at school. I really didn't care about anything anymore. I don't think that's the right word, but it was just like I was pretty numb to a lot of things.
Yes.
And living up to those obligations and expectations, I didn't want to do anymore.
Right.
So that's really the point where everything turned and I started to get into a lot of trouble. My grades were going down. I was hanging out with the wrong crowds. Um, and just to give you a kind of time frame, this is California in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the gang scene was huge, and that's where I got myself caught up in. um, I personally wasn't a part of it, but the man who would become my husband was deeply involved in that. Um, when we first met, we're talking 6 foot tall, 244 pounds of all muscle, football player. It was just like, wow. And, we got to talking, we got into a relationship, and for a couple months, I was on cloud nine. I had the guy everybody wanted. The girls wanted him. Everybody was his friend. He knew everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And little did I know just how many girls were getting him.
Right. Right.
And, he would take me to different parties. We would hang out. And little by little, it was just like, I was, here I was at 12 years old. This is just a time frame. I was 12 years old. He had just turned 16. Um, we were going to these parties where it was gangbangers from 15 to 20. I believe the oldest was about 28, 29.
Mm-hmm.
And they called me baby girl because I was the youngest. Like, I was this little girl who had no clue what this world was like, just like starry eyed.
Yeah, right. I think a lot of us are um very bold at that age. Because when
Mm-hmm,
you think back now, you like, I was actually 12
mm-hmm.
hanging around with this group of people.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just like, at that time, I thought I was big and bad, hanging out with all these dudes, rough, in and out of jail. That was that was my rebellion.
Mhm.
And my boyfriend, um, he he showed me a lot of things back then that I was just like, okay. I mean, red flags were going off left and right. I should have known better, but I was so in my head, and just like, I don't want to live the life I was groomed to be
Mhm.
in, that type of thing. Yeah, exactly, invincible. I was getting into so much trouble. Little did I know how much trouble would come to me doing that. So my boyfriend and I, we became active at that age, and I ended up becoming pregnant at 13.
Got it. Got it.
Um, I did have my daughter.
Mhm.
She's a wonderful woman now. Um, you know, we have our relationship.
Yeah.
Um, but my dad, of course, was not happy at all about this. Here,
Mhm.
my boyfriend was 16 years old. He should have known better.
Right.
And I had just turned 13, and just to find out I was pregnant.
Mhm.
Um, so at that time, me and my dad stopped really getting along. Him and I fought a lot, um, because it seemed like after my mom passed away, he just lost any type of parental brain he did have.
And
Um,
real quick, my condolences.
he buried himself in work,
Mhm.
and it was just like, you do know you have two kids still at home, right? Like, he would be gone at 5 o'clock in the morning and not come home until maybe 11, 12 o'clock at night.
Wow.
And I still had to run the house. And my brother, my younger brother, he was 3 years younger than me. So when my mom passed, me being 11, he was 8. He went through his own rebellion, and there was no way I was controlling him. I was like,
Mhm.
I'm not your mom. So he would do his thing, I would do my thing, and my dad pretty much had two unruly kids on his hand.
Right.
So I can see where that went. Um, but my dad, when he confronted my boyfriend, that didn't go too well. Um, it was just like, well, she's pregnant. There's not much we can do about it now. You know, and everybody looked at me as like, well, what are you gonna do? I was like, oh, I'm keeping the baby.
Right.
That's you know, it was my responsibility. And again, this went on with, I have an obligation, I have a responsibility, I have to take care of it.
Yep.
So here I was at 13 with a little baby. And my boyfriend, he still did his thing. He was out with the boys. He was hanging out. He was getting into trouble. Um, there was a lot of times he would come over to my dad's house at like about 2 o'clock in the morning, knocking on my window. Hey, come outside. And my dad's like, excuse me, no, this is not working. Um, so that it was a huge period of time where my dad and him did not get along at all. Um, there there was one big red flag that ended up happening that my dad wasn't too happy about. And at that point, it was either I stay with him or I leave. And it happened around Valentine's Day.
Mhm.
Um, and my boyfriend wanted this trench coat. And again, this is 1992. Um, $150 for a trench coat was expensive.
Yes. Very.
And I asked my dad, I was like, "Hey, can I get 200 bucks out of my trust fund to buy a jacket for him for Valentine's Day?" And my dad was like, "Hell no. You are not using your money to buy stuff for your boyfriend." Looking back on that, that's what he was supposed to do. He was my
Right.
dad. He was
Hmm.
protecting my money from making
Yes.
stupid decisions. Um, but then I had the biggest fit. I was like, I wanted to get this for him. It was a present. That was our argument. Valentine's came and I didn't have that present for my boyfriend. He went off the rails.
Mm.
Like I didn't try hard enough. I didn't talk to my dad. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. And at that point, I was just so thrown back by how quickly his behavior changed. And he ended up shoving me into the wall. And I
Mhm.
fell back. And if you can imagine, people usually have their beds up against the wall.
Mhm.
Well, that corner between the bed and the wall, he pinned me down. Like he put his hand on my chest like
Wow.
this. And at that point, he was about 250 pounds,
Mhm.
260. And I was a buck wet.
Wow.
And he started punching down. So after he was done with everything, this whole side of my face was swollen.
Mm-mm-mm. I'm so.
And I was just like, I was totally just in shock. I really didn't realize what happened. And at that point, I picked up my daughter and I went home. And we didn't talk for 2 weeks.
Wow. Mm-mm.
And looking back, I was like, I really don't know how I played that off. Like I put makeup on. I was like, oh, I was roughhousing, and at that time I was athletic. I ran track. I did a lot of things. I done a lot of sports,
Mhm.
and I was like, oh yeah, I was just, and I was outside and I hit myself. Whatever. I don't know how that even flew with anybody.
Well, I was about to say, did they believe that?
I didn't know how that flew with anybody, and all of a sudden I started getting flowers sent to me at school.
Mm.
Um, Flowers were showing up every period. We had 7 periods in a day, and I would get a bunch of roses for each period of class. So at the end of that day, I had 7 vases of flowers. And all the girls were like, "Oh my gosh, how sweet! Yada yada yada. He sent you flowers at school." And when I was leaving campus, there he was in the parking lot. He was sitting
Ooh.
in the parking lot, and he apologized. Had a teddy bear for me, and that's the way it continued for a few weeks. The love bombing.
Right.
Uh,
That's exactly what it was.
yeah, he was so sweet. He would take me out to eat. He took the baby for a little while, so I had my own time. It was just like I fell into that. I was like, he can be a sweet guy. He's really great. Um, that lasted for a little while. My dad still had his suspicions, but my dad was going through a completely different thing, and come to find out that we had to move from where we were, and my dad was like, the only place I can find is really really far away.
Mhm.
So when I told my boyfriend that, well, this is where my dad has to move, um, it was about 2 hours away from where we were currently. My boyfriend was like, "No, you're not taking my daughter away from me,"
Right.
and he took his daughter to his mom's house. And here I was just like, okay, what am I doing now? And he calls me up. He's like, ask one of your friends if you could stay with them, or you know what? Because I'm gonna ask my mom if either the baby can stay with me or the both of you guys can stay. I was like, okay, and I had that conversation with my dad, like, well, he doesn't want his daughter to be that far away, and my dad's like, well, he has a car. Like, looking back on these conversations now, I can totally understand as a parent
Mhm.
where my dad was coming from. It was just like, no, he has a car, he can come see his daughter.
Mhm.
Um, you know, my dad ended up moving, and I ended up staying with a friend that was close by. Her mom was like, okay, you can stay with us. Um, I stayed there for a little while, and then come to find out that her mom was having people stay there too. Like, she she was a softie. If somebody was in trouble, she was there to help. And that's what she did. And my boyfriend was fine with it at the time. He was like, okay, you can stay there. Things are great. Him and I would still have our fights that were pretty big. Um, but he would take our daughter for the weekend. And that was pretty normal for the first 2 weeks I was staying with my friend. And then he was just like, you know what? No, she's going to come live with me. And he presented it in a way that was just like, oh, well, you know what, you're 13 going on 14, you can focus on your schoolwork, I'll have her live with me and my mom. So for the first year that our daughter was alive, she lived with her dad,
Mhm.
and I would go to his mom's for the weekend. So when I came back to my friend's house, I had my own room and everything else like that. But then there was another person living there that that we didn't know. And my friend's mom's like, "Oh, well, he's gonna stay with us for a little while, because his he needed a place to stay and he can't stay with his dad." Perspective: this is a 26-year-old man.
Mhm.
My boyfriend comes over, and they hit it off right away. At first, everything was great. They found out that they had similar backgrounds. Um, they were from their backgrounds in the gang area were similar, but different cities. Something happened. I don't know what, and I will never know what. But something happened between the two of them that they started uh, beefing against each other,
Mhm.
and it got to the point where because I was living with him, I'd be on the phone all the time with my boyfriend, be like, "Hey, this is what's happening. This is what's going on." And then things started getting really creepy. Like, there was a couch at the end of the hallway, and he would sit there until I came out of the shower and just watch me walk to my room.
Mm-mm-mm.
And at this point, I'm 14 years old.
Wow.
And again, I would call him and be like, hey, this is what's going on. I need to get out of here. Like, I don't feel safe. And he's like, we'll figure it out. Fast forward to that summer. Um, they were beefing big time. Like, there wasn't a day that I was like a middle person. But one of my boyfriend's homeboys would be sitting out front just waiting for that dude to come out, or either that or they'd be sitting out front to take me to school. Like, I was driven to and from school by one of his homeboys.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody would always be there to keep an eye on me. Well, one day, my friend's mom, they were going to have a house party. And I was just like, okay, cool. We're having a house party. Nothing out of the ordinary, because there were always house parties if somebody wanted to have one. Well, that time, the house party got pretty big. There was a lot of people, more than usual. And it wasn't unusual for of course, drinking and all that to happen. But at that time, I was more into experimenting. So if you guys don't remember, there was a drink called Zima back then. It had just
Yeah.
came out.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, cool. Oh, okay, I'll try this. I had one, and my head started spinning. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go to my room. I'm not feeling this no more. Go to my room, and there's no locks on any of the bedroom doors. So while the music's going, my head's spinning. I'm just like, I just don't feel good. I start to go to sleep. And who comes in the door? But the dude my man's beefing with.
Mm-mm-mm.
He had a plan. And that night, he took what he needed to take, 100% SA. And it was a message to my boyfriend.
Wow.
And he's like, you go back and you tell your man that I did this.
Mm-mm-mm.
And that he can't protect crap. And if he wants, he can come see me. So that's exactly what I did. I told my boyfriend what happened. Told him everything that went on. I gave him the message. And my boyfriend looked at me like, so what were you doing?
Wow. Why did I know he was going to blame it?
I was like, I was in my bed trying to go to sleep in a house I'm supposed to be safe in. This is my own house. And he was just like, you must have wanted it somehow.
Mm-mm-mm.
I was like, no. Like, my first instinct was to tell him, then go to the hospital and press charges. His thing was, no, you ain't going to the police for nothing. Like, his gang rules were applied to me because I was his girl. I was not supposed to snitch. I was not supposed to say anything. I was not going to the hospital. I was not doing a doggone thing, but keeping my mouth shut. So I was like, okay, well, you're not going to help me. So I went to my friend, and I went to my friend's mom, and I was like, I need to go to the hospital because this is what happened. And then they looked at me, and she's like, why do you think every black man that's around likes you or wants you?
Uh-huh.
I'm just sitting here, I'm in shock because it's like the people that are supposed to help me are not helping me. So honestly, when I was 14, it was the last time I wore a bathing suit. It was the last time I showed any type of skin at all. I started wearing the big baggy clothes, big baggy jeans, and this was 94. So baggy clothes wasn't out of the ordinary.
Right.
And So nobody really thought anything was going on except my math teacher, because I was so skilled in, you know, anything STEM, mathematics, science, all that stuff. That was my thing. My grades were slipping. I didn't, I wasn't participating in class like I usually do. I wasn't as outgoing. I wasn't doing, my behavior had completely changed.
Mm-hmm.
So, she took me to the side and she asked me what was going on. And at that point, I had such a fear of my boyfriend, of saying anything, that I was just like, I'm fine. Nothing's going on. It's just, there's a lot of things going on. I'm just a bit overwhelmed. So I didn't tell anyone about anything that happened, because I just felt like anybody I told wouldn't help me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so fast forward a little bit. I'm almost 15, and I find out I'm pregnant again. It is my boyfriend's, but he uses that as a platform to shame me. Be
Mm-hmm.
like, well, this isn't, that kid really isn't mine. I was like, are you kidding me?
Wow. Wow.
Like, the timing is so off. How could it not be yours?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we had our son. As soon as we found out it was a boy, he was happy about it. Never really said anything about it again. We had our son. And at that point, he was just like, you know what? I'm going to find us a place to live. And which he did. He was 18 and he got us an apartment with some roommates. And so at 15, I had my own apartment. We were raising two kids with my boyfriend. We had a lot of things going on. I was still going to school, surprisingly. I went on independent study and I ended up graduating early at 17.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out I was pregnant again. So we had a daughter. We had the three kids, and we ended up getting finally our own apartment. It was just us, the five of us, our family. And that's when things actually started getting a lot worse, because it was just us. Um, the fighting got worse.
Mm-hmm.
Throwing around the house. Like, I had my back slammed so many times up against the wall. We had holes in our walls. Um, I was still just not saying anything. I kept that stoic face. Everything was great. Nobody outside the house knew what was going on. Um, the kids, they were brought up to, anything that goes on in the house stays in the house. Nobody says anything. If they did say anything, there would be severe punishment and severe consequences. And their dad ran the house with an iron fist. Um, at 19, I pretty much had no family around. Like, everybody was gone. I was either cut off or we just lost contact. Um, and I pretty much had no one around. And he proposed. And me, pretty much feeling like I had no options, I accepted and we got married. So I was married at 19. And for the next, I'd say about 15 years, it was more of the same. Fighting, the fighting, the hiding, the acting like nothing's wrong. Um, it was just a whole lot of chaos. And the chaos was continuously getting worse until 2012. Um, 2012 is when he ended up having his first stroke.
Mm.
Uh, we took him to the hospital, and they said he had a stroke, and he was 37, or no, he was 33 at the time.
Wow.
He was 33 when he had his first stroke, and he was continuously gaining weight. So at that point in time, he was around 375. He was 6'2", 375. And me, I was 5'4", and maybe about 150 pounds, 140 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
So this man was 3 times my size.
Mm.
So I was still working, taking care of the house. I still had the people pleasing attitude. I was still cooking, cleaning, working, and he was at home.
Right.
He did not have a job. He couldn't hold down a job because every time he did get a job, he would argue with management and get fired.
Mm.
Like, he did not know how to control his anything, none of his emotions. So there was no way he was able to keep a job. Um, I was up and coming in finance. I was constantly getting promotion after promotion. I was getting good jobs. Um, at let's see, at 36, I was already making six figures.
Wow.
I was in high finance positions in companies. I started from the bottom. Um, Started in office managing, learned bookkeeping, accounting, all the way up, and I became an accounting manager. And I was working in Newport Beach. And for those who don't know, Newport Beach is a very affluent area. It's very rich. It has a lot of things going on there. At that company, we would do a lot of company parties. There would be company events. There was one instance where we had a lunch on a boat. One of our vendors gave us lunch on a boat, and I was taking pictures and you know showing what a great time I was having. Well, I posted it on Facebook, and he was not all too happy with that.
Mm.
He said he basically said that the snob was coming back out of me,
Wow.
and I needed to get that beat out of me because I don't know struggle. And honestly, my dad was very proud of the way he raised his daughter. I I had never, outside of a school bus, I had never taken public transportation. And I thought that was the norm. But to my husband, he thought that was like I was condescending, like I was looking down on him because his family didn't come from that. And I was like, when did I ever say anything like that? But I remember my daughter telling me that she heard her dad tell me that he needed to beat the snob out of me.
Mm-mm-mm-mm.
And that's why I got punished so much. And I was like, okay. Uh, so again, I never told anybody. Whatever went on in the house stayed in the house. Nobody had any conversation about that. Um, some people had suspicions, but nobody within the house really confirmed it. And it was when I was 37, he started being very particular about the way he would leave marks on my body because he always accused me of cheating. So if somebody ever said anything to him, it was because I either said something which was punishable, or somebody saw something they weren't supposed to, which was also punishable. And not only would I get punished, but that person I was with would get it too.
Right.
So, it was,
Ooh.
yeah, it was, I just kept my mouth shut,
Right.
kept living life like, everything was great when it wasn't. Um, Fast forward another 3 years. He's now 40. I'm 37, and he has his second stroke.
Mm.
This stroke takes 98% of his mobility, which means that I am now 100% his caretaker.
Mm-mm-mm.
So the physical abuse was limited. The verbal abuse got worse.
Right. Real quick, did you say what was causing the strokes?
His weight,
Being overweight. Got it.
being overweight. Yes,
Okay.
at this point, he was tipping the scales about 420 pounds.
Ooh, okay.
But he still, stood up, carried himself well, things like that. Um, and he had his second stroke, and he ended up going through physical therapy and everything else like that. But 3 months later, he passed in his sleep,
Oh,
and that that was more of a traumatizing event for me because I had went to I had checked everything like I usually do. I fell asleep for a little bit, and when I turned over to check on him, he was gone. Like I woke up to him being gone. So I called the paramedics and everything else like that, and they pronounced it. And my daughter was home at the time. My oldest daughter, she was home at the time, and she's 100%. She at that point she still was 100% daddy's girl. She was doing everything she could to please her dad, even though it was never enough.
mhm.
Um, and she thought her dad was playing. So she was like, daddy, stop playing. You're scaring mommy, that type of thing. But when they had taken him away, I was 40 years old and a widow. And my whole world just went upside down.
Mhm.
Um, so when I went, I had to go back to work because the person I was working for, um, he really didn't want me taking time off. And I went to go see my therapist, and the therapist was like, "No, you need time off because I was having executive, what was it? Um, I was having really hard time making decisions. I couldn't function, and my kids were just like they were scared for me because I had no color. Like there was really you could not see life in me,
Mhm.
and I needed time away. So my therapist was like, "You need time off." She wrote the letter to my boss that I needed the time off, and the very next day I got fired.
I'm sorry.
And I was like, okay, one
That's
thing after
crazy.
another, one thing after another, and chaos just ensued. I lost my husband passed in October of
Mhm.
2019. I lost my job February 2019, and
Mm-mm-mm.
then the whole world shut down March.
Well,
That March. And what's crazy is that after my husband passed and the world's shutting down, that's when his homeboys decided to come out of the woodworks and start widow hawking. They're like, "Hey, you want to kick it?" All this other stuff like that, and I'm just like, "I didn't kick it with you when he was alive. Why would I kick it with you now?" Like these were the phone calls I was getting.
what?
Yeah, these were the phone calls I was getting, and it was just like one thing after another. It was just like people I thought were my friends were not really my friends. Um, those were dropping off, and it was just like everything that I thought was my life was falling apart. And then I get sick, and for a few months, the way my body was acting, the doctors thought I had leukemia. So that was something I was facing, and fortunately, it was not leukemia. It turned out to be a rare disorder that affects. 1% of Asians. It's called Kokichi Fujimoto.
Mm.
It's an autoimmune disease when your body attacks itself.
Okay.
And what the doctor had said was I had been under so much duress that my body's trying to regulate itself and doesn't know what's normal.
Oh man.
So now that everything was gone, it really didn't know how to act.
Mm-hmm.
And I was finally starting to learn myself. I had to relearn everything about myself. And it was, I mean, for some people, the world shutting down was a bad thing, but I believe for me, it was one of the best things ever.
Mm-hmm.
The world was quiet. I could focus on myself. Um, I was starting to learn myself all over again. My likes, dislikes,
Like a reset.
a
It's like you got
full
to
reset for
reset.
everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had found a job, but while I was in that job, it was just like it didn't feel right. It didn't feel where I needed to be anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, everything, you know, everything that I had learned and things like that, I was experiencing a complete shift in perspective. Um, as an employee, I would always come across leaderships that were not really leaders. They were dictators. And that was not the kind of person that I wanted to work for.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I had left that job and I had found another job. And again, I felt I was stuck there. And it was at this point that I actually started talking to one of my daughter's friends' dads, and he was a blessing for me. He We had known each other for a very long time, but he had shown me a lot of things, and he turned out to be my peace.
Mm.
Um, he bought me my own company. Like he bought me my LLC and he's like, this is yours.
Wow. That's
Do
amazing.
you know, do what you need to focus that, you know, that's for you. And the things that he was doing for me were healing. Like when him and I started to get serious, like even though there's that learning part of each other, because this is my very first adult relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So when the first time he had gotten mad, I just froze. I didn't know what to do. And he kind of looked at me and he just walked away.
Mm.
And that had never happened to me before. Because as soon as his voice started escalating, I was expecting pain.
Right.
That never came. So no matter how loud he gets, how angry he gets, or whatever, I started to learn that I could still feel safe with that.
Mm-hmm.
So even when he gets loud, I'm just like, okay, sir.
Right.
And that's the growth in me. Um, he's been extremely patient. He's been extremely loving. And like anytime I have something going on, he's like, "Are you good? Okay?" Like he'll be dead asleep, and if he rolls over and thinks he hits me, he's like, "Oh, babe, are you okay? You okay?"
Right.
And that's again something I wasn't used to. And you know, I was finally able to sleep. Like I remember the first sleep I had. It was like a 16-hour deep sleep and everything. And when I woke up, he was there and he's like, "You were sleeping so good, I didn't want to bother you."
That's awesome.
I was just like,
Wow.
"Sir, sir."
That's amazing.
So, do I still have nightmares? Yes, I have nightmares a lot. And because he works overnight, um, I sleep by myself the majority of the week. And it's in those times that I have my nightmares and I have my night terrors. And, you know, there's a lot of things mentally still going on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when he is home and he's around, my brain goes quiet and I'm able to focus, and it's just wonderful. It's like I can breathe.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly did not realize what a normal relationship was like and how easy it is just to interact. It's like I can talk to him and not get that clench feeling like, should I even say this to him?
Right.
And like I said, no matter how angry or how loud he gets, I still feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And that is such a wonderful feeling. And then I'm still in my 9 to 5, but he's showing me what it's like to be more on my own. The first time I had to speak in front of the camera, he's like, "Babe, you got this. I know you got this."
Right.
I was just like, "Sir,
Right. You got a sounds like you got a good one in your corner.
he is a very good one." Um, he's pushing, he's giving me that push to be out on my own, be an entrepreneur, no, giving me the confidence. Is it's not the fact that I don't have it, it's just it's little right now.
Mm-hmm.
So you always need that extra push to be like, you got this, you go
I
on and
completely
do your
understand.
thing.
Right.
So as I grow it for myself, he's watering that growth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the way I see it. So everything is still kind of messy right now because I still have to hold myself accountable for a lot of things, because I have to make sure that I don't treat him like he's my husband. Like my late husband acted a certain way. This man does not.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't take out how I feel towards him because he didn't do anything.
That's true.
And that's where I have to hold myself accountable. And that's the dirty work in the healing, is your triggers are your responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Everyone else is doing their own thing, and how you react to it is what you can control.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I have to, sit back and, really take a look at myself and be like, okay, I was wrong in that situation, and I need to say I was wrong in that situation because
That's
he
right.
reacted correctly to something I did wrong. And yeah, it's there's a lot of accountability that needs to be done. There's a lot of self reflection, and then knowing that, you know, not only am I dealing with adult trauma, but I'm dealing with childhood trauma at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Like my childhood wasn't really a childhood, and even right now at the age I'm at, I just feel so sheltered. Like I haven't lived life. And, when people talk about things, I'm like, I have no clue what you're talking about. Sorry.
Yeah. Yes. I say that all the time. I be like, it sucks to lose that child version of us, the
Hmm.
carefree person, the one who has that amazing imagination,
Yeah.
the innocence.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, now I'm still in that mess. I'm working on myself. I'm at work in my day job. I still deal with a lot of egos and things like that, but now that I'm more outspoken, it's just like I got to refrain from speaking wrongly to the wrong people because
Mhm.
sometimes my mouth still gets me into trouble. And I get really protective of my coworkers when I see the injustice in the workplace. And that's where I get the comments from other people. Um, you don't need to be a 9 to 5er. You need to be on your own and leading others.
Mhm.
And I feel that, and I'm called to that, but I'm still scared to step out of the shadows because I spent 28 years, my late husband and I were together.
Mhm.
I spent all that time trying to be invisible. I didn't want to be seen by anybody. And that's where the knots in my stomach come out, and it's just like I have a calling, but I need to get past that self blockage,
Right.
and that's the hard part.
Because that's what they say. They say at the end of the day, the only person holding you back is you.
Yes, definitely. But here I am today, and um, as I mentioned to Jamie before, this is the first time I've told my story, and it kind of shows how far I've traveled, but it still feels like I haven't accomplished anything. No matter how many times people tell me what you've been through and everything else like that, it just feels like that survival is because you had to.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks, you know, it looks great on paper. There's a lot of things done on paper, but in my head,
Right.
I haven't really done anything.
I'd say it's just the beginning. Because with you speaking out, you are beginning to break those chains. Because it takes courage to step out and say, this happened to me. You are about to be a light to so many women just by sharing your story. And I say your voice is your power, because you're not only mending others, but at the same time you're mending yourself too.
Mm-hmm.
Just keep speaking about it. This is amazing. You're doing amazing. And
Thank you.
I see you. You're no longer invisible. We see you.
No, and that's it's a big compliment I do have to give to my new man, because
Yes.
before what I was told before was, I was gray, there was no life, and now a lot of people are like, "Dang girl, you're glowing."
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
So, I have to give him credit for that.
Awesome. 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 Awesome testimony.
Thank you.
Um, Also, do you want to share a little bit about your business?
Yes. So I am now building. So I have one of two businesses. My focus is on wellness of not only physical but financial. And one business is a CBD company, Marvin Garden 710. It is family run. So on the Instagram at Marvin Garden 710, you will see myself, you will see my sister in law, you will see my partner. Um, it's us. It's our family running this and sharing wellness with the world. Um, we have pop-ups in 24-hour fitness. I'm participating in Blunt Brunch, which is women in cannabis,
Mm-hmm.
and we we like to get the education out there because there's a lot of misinformation. So that's what one of my passions is educating those on the wellness of CBD.
Right.
And when we have the table events, that's what I lead with is education. Any questions? Smile and a sample.
Awesome.
And then the business that he had bought for me to cultivate myself, is to help people with financial literacy, accounting, bookkeeping. I keep your books clean for your CPA because I personally like that one-on-one relationship with the clients. um, and not only that, but I like to help people grow their own business. If I don't stay your accountant, then I want you to grow and be the best business owner that you can. But
Awesome.
yeah, my
Awesome.
passion is education and definitely the wellness. And that's my service to the world.
Amazing. That sounds amazing. And what I am going to do is I'm going to get all that information from you, and I'm going to repost it on the community wall,
Thank you.
um, so that other people can come and check you out.
Send
Awesome.
me a message. I'll be here. I'll answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions, or does anyone want to come up and say anything? you do, I will drop the link. Yes, Misty, you are a little late, but it's okay. You can watch the replay. You can definitely watch the replay. Let's see. I'm gonna put this link in the chat. Give me a moment and see if anybody wants to come up. If not, we'll get ready to or if anyone has any someone asked, what are your self-care techniques?
Okay, so for self care, when I was in a relationship, when I was with my late husband, I had migraines 24/7. And after he passed, I didn't have any migraines anymore, but I do have headaches. So one of the things I use for the headaches is our our roll on. It's I put it on my forehead, and it's nice and cooling, and that helps to relieve the the headaches, the headache part. Um, I'm dairy free, so partly because I'm lactose intolerant, but I don't have dairy, and I try to stay as hydrated as possible. I am a carnivore, so I can never stay away from meat, but I make sure I have a good balance of meat and vegetables. Um, and uh, I didn't think it was that important before for skincare, but skincare is definitely important. Sunscreen, um, have to have, because a lot of the aging and the wrinkles come from the damage from the sun. So make sure you keep your skin protected and hydrate. Drink a
Right.
lot. Exercise is a good thing too. I have been really bad at that. I need to get back at that. But yeah,
Baby steps.
baby
Baby
steps.
steps. Be like, I just got back into it. Probably about this would be week 3. So it seems like I'm always like, okay, week 1 again. All right, this is week 1 again.
Yep.
baby, baby.
Week 1, part 2.
Yes, that's exactly how it is. All right. So
Yes,
did
sauna.
anybody
The
want?
sauna is great.
Yes, let me see that. It sure is. That's okay, Misty. That is okay. Listen, we do have another podcast scheduled for tomorrow at 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So make sure you're there for that one. But do
Yeah.
you have anything else you want to add, Desiree?
Um, check out Marvin Garden 710. Corvum Financial is my financial part of it. You can reach me on LinkedIn. I will. So as I was telling Jamie, my calling is to come out and speak more. One of the stomach turning projects that I have working is a personal blog, speaking more in front of the camera, and I have it on Instagram right now. There's nothing in it. I haven't started it, but it is I am Desiree Renee. So you'll be seeing more of me there in 2025. But like I said, there's nothing there right now. I will give Jamie all the information so she can post it and you can reach out to me.
Definitely. And I will definitely be posting that. So if that's it, we'll go ahead and wrap it up until next time. I want to thank you, Desiree, for coming out and sharing such a powerful and inspiring story with us today. Your journey of growth and transformation is something we can all learn from. And we're so grateful to have you on the show. And to our listeners, thank you for being a part of today's conversation. I appreciate you. We appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in to this live podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you like, share, subscribe, own your story, love your journey, and keep rising. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.